Recording in progress.
Oh my gosh, I am so excited to have you here, Janioris. Thank you so much for coming on today's show. As I mentioned, you were one of our speakers for She is Leadership Conference, the virtual, and everybody loved you. You were
Oh,
amazing. So I
that is
am
so
grateful.
kind. Thank you so much. It is an absolute privilege to be here. I'm so excited to dive in.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. So, I want to take our listeners back to the beginning of how you initially got into boudoir photography. What led you there?
Yeah. Well, I've been doing photography for, gosh, I won't say exactly how many years. I'll date myself, us women. No, but probably since high school. So since the age old days of the dark room and developing and the whole thing in film. So I've been doing photography for a really long time. Even in high school, I used to arrange little photo shoots with my girlfriends, and plan the whole thing and outfits and makeup and everything, even as
I
a high
love it.
schooler. And then, I went on to photograph everything, because as photographers, you kind of start photographing flowers and then you go from there and sort of choose your niche. And I did everything. I always say everything but babies. I know better. That was a whole different skill set, but I pretty much did everything else. And then my business is now only about 6 years old. So I was about to get married and I was searching for a boudoir photographer for myself. And I was super excited to have this beautiful gift for my husband. And I found it really difficult to find a photographer whose style I liked, mixed with a rhetoric and message that I could agree with and that I could jump on board with. And that was really important to me because obviously it's a very vulnerable experience. It's a very intimate experience. And I wanted a photographer that could align with me and my values and what was important to me. And what I found at the time, which is not necessarily true anymore, but what I found at the time was that there were a lot of photographers that were all about empowering women at the cost of emasculating our men. It was like, power to women, boo men, right? And I thought to myself, well, gosh, I'm about to get married. I'm all about the dudes, go guys.
Right.
So I just thought, well, I just don't think that you have to put down our men in order to bring up our women. And so I wasn't able to find a photographer. And now a lot of that has expanded and changed. But my point was, well, let me step into that gap, becoming the woman that can champion relationships and marriage and people who believe in one another and in another's strengths to complement one another while also empowering women and having really sexy, sensual photos. And that was kind of the gap I stepped into and why this all began.
That's so interesting. So, when you first did that, was it a challenging transition or was it pretty seamless?
Well, I would say that business wise, it could have been a little bit of resistance, a little bit of hesitation on my part. Um, I'm a conservative wife, and I'm a Christian woman, and so I thought to myself, "Gosh, this is going to be a little bit of a difficult road to navigate." But in terms of the art of it, I was in my zone. I initially, like I said, I've been doing like my girlfriend's photo shoots since high school. And so I just felt like it was really easy to connect with women. I knew how to pose women well. I've always been a curvy woman. And so I know women's curves well. I know that aspect of it. I've always been really into, confidence and really exuding that kind of confidence. So stepping into the art of it was much easier than it was to necessarily step into the business side of it. But after I photographed my first client, it became evident that I really had to step in. And we can go there if you'd like to.
Yes, I absolutely
Yeah,
wanna
I
go
know. I
there.
know. It's a little
It's
cliffhanger.
like you can't
No,
leave
no,
that kind of like hook and then just leave.
no, it's true. Well, when I first photographed, one of my first client was a friend, and she wanted, like me, something to gift her husband, but they had been married for a long time. They were going to renew their vows, and so she wanted something that was like a bridal gift. But they had been married a long time, had several children, and when she came out to me, every girl listening knows a bodysuit, right? We love our bodysuits. We wear them even to everyday life, right? It's the newest thing. And so they're sassy and sexy, but they're still, wearable even out in public a lot of the time. And so she came out in a bodysuit and it did have some lace, but it was, it was not revealing by any stretch of the imagination. And she came out whispering to me and she said, I've never worn lingerie before. I always thought it was a sin. And I thought,
Really?
gosh, I need to step into this. There has to be a little bit more depth to this, more information, more help to the conservative wife who loves the Lord, is in a committed, loving relationship with her husband and still feels shame around some of these things because they have been so taboo for so long, even within the circles and within the church for many instances, that there are women literally feeling bad about this beautiful thing they get to experience within a loving, committed relationship. So after that experience and that small encounter, it just set the stage for me to think, gosh, this is absolutely necessary. I have to step into this. It's too important to let go.
It sounds like she created your niche. Like after that friend that you worked with, you knew that she was the exact target you were going after.
Right. The kind of client, right? And every
Yes.
businesswoman knows that she's got her ideal client or her avatar. That did happen pretty early for me. But also, as businesswomen, we're always better served to serve the person that we once were. You've heard that before,
Yes,
right? How we
absolutely.
can serve who we used to be. And so in some ways, it's also who I used to be.
Right.
I was brought up in a great environment with awesome parents who didn't bring about that kind of shame. And I could talk to my mom about anything. We were, and still are best friends. But I knew in my surroundings there were a lot of women who had questions that wouldn't be answered or things that they needed to know that were not being discussed or taught. And so yeah, I kind of became the person to serve, kind of liaison between one woman and another. And now I'm blessed to have all kind of clients, like we know we have an ideal client, but we also serve all kinds of women that feel attracted to that message too. And so there's a lot of women that I serve that are or aren't in relationships, that are or aren't affiliated to any religious background or context, just different kinds of women. And I'm so blessed to serve them all. But I know from the start, that's who I was targeting because I knew it was so, so necessary.
Yeah. So let's talk about women for a minute, right? Because we're
Let's.
both all about empowering women.
Yes, yes, yes.
And let's be real, we all have insecurities
Mm.
that affect us. I can tell you that I wanted to get boudoir photos. I said I was going to do it for my 40th birthday. And then my
Mm-hmm.
40th birthday came and I'm like, well, let me lose 10 more pounds and then
Uh-huh.
I can do it. Right now I'm in my 50s and it's never been done. Right. So I know I'm not alone in that. I know somebody is
Yes.
listening going, yeah, I said I wanted to do that too, but our insecurities stop us. Getting
Mm-hmm.
in front of another person with their camera, and like you said, it's a very vulnerable moment. How do you help women overcome that feeling of being insecure?
Well, I'll say this, insecurities will always exist. And so, regardless what I do or what you may surround yourself with as a woman, even myself, as I teach and preach confidence and talk about all of these things about reconciling with our physical bodies so that we can become the women we want to be, I still struggle with insecurities myself. There are days where I look in the mirror and I have to really redirect my inner dialogue because I am putting myself down and dragging myself down. So I think it's important before we even talk about what we could do to help this to realize that it's always going to be there to some degree. I think the challenge is, how do I fight back more consistently? How do I equip myself with the tools to fight back against this? But knowing that it might rear its ugly head again at some point, so that's the first part. Insecurities are going to happen so long as comparison happens. And comparison will happen so long as technology and the internet and social media continue to be a part of our lives, right? Well, I'll go further as to say, even if you were just going to school, dropping off your kids at the pickup or drop off line, you would still compare yourself to someone you saw. So
Mhm.
that's always going to exist. Now, the way that I try to attack it, right, to some degree, or give my clients and my audience members the tools to attack it, First of all, is creating the kind of content that helps women remind themselves of the tools that they already have, right? So, what happens these days is that we have a barrage of information all the time. And so, if I can combat it with a little bit more information that goes against some of those lies that we hear, then maybe we have a fighting chance at receiving enough of the alternate information to decide what's right for us. So that's part of it,
Hmm.
creating the kind of volume of content and information that would combat some of the other lies that we receive.
Mhm.
Um, and then the other thing is really allowing women, giving women the space to understand that we are more than our physical bodies. And if we can understand that, even though some of these insecurities, in fact, most of these insecurities start out with our concept of our bodies, that we're more than that. I always say, as amazing as your body is, it's the least amazing thing about you, right? And if we
You're
can
right.
really, yes, it's the least, I mean, it's pretty spectacular, but it's the least amazing thing. And if we could really focus on that and our inner dialogue and how we attack what's happening in our minds, what's happening in our hearts, what we know about our worth and our identity, how we feel about the confidence with which we encounter new scenarios, different situations, how we assess challenges, our resilience, those physical insecurities will feel much smaller in comparison to what else we have to offer.
So it almost sounds like going through this process of boudoir photography and being vulnerable also helps contribute to building a woman's confidence.
Well,
And
I would definitely try for it to be, right?
yeah,
Well, the thing about boudoir photography
yeah,
specifically is that you don't get to see yourself in this light, right? You don't look at yourself in this light. For the most part, most women don't have a way to kind of come outside of themselves, having like out of body experience to see what they look like in this capacity, what they
true.
look like in lingerie. Most women only look at themselves naked right before jumping in the shower or something, right? That's not
True,
really
yeah.
the best light, physically, literally, and figuratively, for you to look at yourself, right? And so this provides almost like kinder eyes and a different opportunity for you to see yourself in a different perspective and see what somebody else might notice about you. In our encounters and the experiences we have, I'm cracking girls up and they get to laugh without worrying about how their tummy fills up with air with it, and how their nose crinkles when they laugh, and they can see just how beautiful they are in these moments in which they don't get to see themselves. So I get to capture that and show them, look, this is you. There's nothing like that first moment when I flip the camera around and they get to see that first image that I haven't edited, haven't touched. It's just them. And that shock of, "Oh, that's me. That's not me. That's you. This is who you are," when you look at yourself with kinder eyes and a better perspective.
I was just gonna ask you, like, what happens? Do you know of do you have a story about somebody who was intimidated to do this and did it and then took a look at those pictures? And have you ever seen, like, a transformation in confidence, like, before your eyes or
100%. It happens all the time. It's the best part of my job. I get to see it happen. She comes in super shy. A lot of times women come in, they say, I don't wear makeup. I don't know anything about makeup. We offer complimentary hair and makeup services. And so it happens in stages. It happens at first when they first see themselves after their makeover, after their makeup and their hair, and they just think, gosh, whoa. And that's one step. Now she's feeling better about herself. And then she comes out in her first outfit, and I am her hype woman and her cheerleader, and she feels a little bit even more better about herself. And then she does the pose and realizes that I coach her through everything that she doesn't know. She doesn't have to know how to be sexy or what to do. I literally tell you how to breathe. So then she does the whole thing the way I've coached her. I show her the photo, and she thinks, what? That's me. How did that happen? I didn't know I could look that way. So it comes in stages. It happens again at the reveal when she sits down and she looks at the photos, and the videos I capture of this, they're all over my social media, but it's so fun because they just keep looking at me like, there's no way. Who is that? It's so fun to watch. And then again, it happens when they receive their products. So they get to see themselves in print, and there's just a different thing about looking at yourself like a masterpiece. I always call my clients masterpieces, according to the word of God, how we are God's masterpiece. But I tell them you are a work of art. So you have to see yourself like an art piece, not just like a digital product that you scroll along with. And when they see themselves in metal wall arts or in acrylic or albums, and they just see that they are artworks, that's just another moment. And then it happens again when they gift it, when they decide they want to share it with someone they love, with their bestie or with their husband or with whoever they show, because they're so proud of these images. I had a girl once tell me, I don't put it on a billboard out of respect for my husband, but gosh, I would put it on a billboard. So it happens again when they share it and they get that reaction from their loved one. So it's just the best. It happens in stages, and I love seeing that blossoming happen.
I love that because I think it's amazing being a woman. And you mentioned earlier about how it was almost like girl power, but then emasculating men, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in business, a lot of times as women, we kind of push our femininity to the side, right? Because she slept her way to the top. She's being too
Mm.
sexy. That's how she closed the deal, right? So there's all these things that can be said. But I love that you are showing women that their body is beautiful and it's okay to show that feminine side because we are women. And you're doing boudoir, which is could be put on a billboard, but typically a little bit more of a private,
Right. Right. Uh-huh.
you know. But I can see how that does cross over into being a professional and
Mm-hmm.
in the business world, probably dressing a little bit differently, right? Not again, not still conservative,
Mm-hmm.
classy,
Mm-hmm.
but not afraid to show femininity.
Well,
Do you
I'll tell
think?
you where it starts. It
Yeah,
literally
yeah.
starts not just from the inside and what we've talked about. We've talked about mindset, we've talked about our heart and all of our abilities and skills, but let's get technical, right? It even starts with your undergarments. I know so many women who haven't had a proper bra sizing in years, or they use the same bra over and over again. It's so stretched out, it's not doing anything for their girls, right? Or they have holy underwear, or they have just underwear that, at the end of the day, if you're uncomfortable from your undergarments out, it's going to show. It's going to show. Your posture reveals it. Your comfort reveals it. So I always talk about that. Like, even if it changed your undergarments and no one saw them ever, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. If you wear beautiful lingerie or really high quality undergarments under your scrubs, it doesn't matter. It changes the way you feel, even if no one gets to see that. It changes your posture. It changes your comfort. It changes the confidence with which you approach things, even if no one sees it. So I think embracing your femininity, even as technically as I have undergarments that kind of amp me up a little bit,
Yeah.
is beautiful. And I think that as women, we have tried to put our femininity aside, like you said, because of some of the messaging that makes it feel like it's a disadvantage, but also because we haven't always been granted historically the same opportunities. And so we have felt like in order to get ahead, I need to emulate, going back to that comparison problem, I
Yeah.
need to emulate what is successful, right? So we emulate a lot of successful patterns in business or anywhere else in the world by trying to emulate our men. And so it's unnatural to us to try to imitate what is natural for a man in business or otherwise. And so now we are even more uncomfortable and less confident in ourselves by trying to be someone we are not, without understanding that our femininity is actually what gives us the edge. It's what helps us complement our partners and our colleagues, and it's what helps us to go further because of what we know, because of who we are, and how we think a little bit differently than our counterparts.
I mean, I'm like applauding. I'm like, yes, preach, preach, preach. I love this.
Right. Yes.
So we've talked about how it could impact just your confidence in a business world. Do you think that it plays a role into better relationships, like with your clients and their marriage or whoever they're
Absolutely.
dating? Do you?
Yeah, yeah. So if we're talking about Boudoir, and then we'll talk about boudoir and how that affects your relationships, and we'll talk about just leaning into your femininity and how that affects relationships. Just because I'm not sure which one you were talking about, so we'll just do both, right? So
That'll
with
work.
so with boudoir, it absolutely helps you because a lot of times what happens with with my clients is that uh, for some of them, their husbands are all over them, or they love them, or they'll say comments that they can't embrace. They don't see that as true. And so until they see it themselves, they're not able to respond accordingly because they feel like, oh, he's all over me. And and we don't validate the fact that, yes, you are beautiful. Yes, you have a lot to offer. Yes, you are sexy. That woman is still in there. I know you have a mom bun right now, but that woman is in there, right? And so it helps relationships because it helps her see something that it's just not enough to receive it from the outside externally unless she knows it internally. And the only way for her to know it internally is to experience it herself and to see it with her own eyes. So with boudoir, it helps that a ton because she's coming out of her comfort zone to understand that that woman is in there. For a lot of our clients, it's a woman that was there and feels like she, has just faded along with life's expectations. And for others, it's just, I don't know that I've ever been that woman and it's who I want to be. And so
Mm.
regardless of that, place in the journey, it does help your relationship because you believe it. And as long as
Mm.
you believe it, it just communicates externally and helps you to and that spunk is still there, and you see that your fire is still there, and you get to be more playful and more excited about your intimacy in every aspect of intimacy, not just sexual intimacy, because you believe it in yourself. So that's how boudoir helps relationships a ton. And then leaning into your femininity, how that helps in relationships a ton, is also, like we've talked about, it helps you to complement one another in a way that flows seamlessly. And now, instead of operating in competition with one another, now you are operating like a well oiled machine because what is his strength, it might be your weakness and vice versa. And instead of thinking or saying to one another, well, you've done this, but almost like, well, you do all of this, but it's not as good as all of this that I do. This whole anything you can do, I can do better mentality, right? And when it comes to relationships, if you have that mentality, you're going to divide from the inside and crash and burn. It would just feel it will fuel a constant resentment in your relationship to the point that it will dissolve and corrode from the inside. And that's my true belief. So if you lean into your femininity, now we're not talking about gender roles as like practices or activities because your strengths might be different than your husband's or different from the traditional roles, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, I know some women who are traditionally really great at cooking and some women that you really don't want them in the kitchen. It's not their strength, right? They really are better suited at handling finances.
Yeah.
Not every woman is a spender like maybe is how is portrayed. There are women who are really good at analyzing finances, structuring savings and investments, and they're really good at that, right? So, like, we're not talking specifically about activities, but about leaning into your strengths that complement your counterpart, your male counterpart, that partner that you have. It's really what it is, a partnership.
Right.
And so, if you lean into that, I think that it will feel much more seamless. It will feel like that ease that we so long for because now you're not comparing, well, you don't do enough because you don't do all of this list of
Mm.
all of the things that I'm good at or that I do. And instead of looking at it quantifiably, like how much are you putting in versus how much I'm putting in, we're looking at it as how much of what you're lacking I can fill in and vice versa. And that is just a seamless operation and a much better place to be at relationally.
That is so important. It makes so much sense. And I'm so glad that you shared all that because it's like, yeah, that's the goal. That really is the goal to have that relationship that's like a well-oiled machine and understanding how you are different and that's okay. So thank you for sharing that. Now, you also offer coaching and educational courses. Can you share a little bit about that with our audience?
Sure. So it's another one of those ways that I love to connect with women because we can get into the nitty gritty of her personal journey and really talk about what are, in conversation, it's almost like it's not therapy because I'm not qualified for therapy, right?
It sounds like
You
therapy.
know, no, it's not therapy, even though, in my educational journey, my degrees are in psychology and all of that, but I am not qualified for therapy. It's not therapy.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more like sitting on a salon chair, right? And every woman that's had a little bit of self-care knows what it's like to sit in a salon chair with a stylist that you have known for a long time, that you connect with, and that you trust, right?
Right.
And in conversation, every time you go, it's like a session, and you go and you kind of, there are times of venting, but then there are times of listening, there are times of wisdom and laughter and all of that. And so I get to connect with women in a much more intimate way beyond what we're doing in the session. And even if she never does a session, I love coaching because I just get to listen in on the experiences from their perspective and maybe offer a counter perspective and maybe offer some exercises and tools that she can apply little by little and see for herself how that impacts her marriage, her own confidence, how she approaches different things. Because the truth is that reconciliation we make with our bodies and that correction that we constantly make to our inner dialogue, it has ripple effects into everything. And so even if we never dove into your marriage specifically, or even if we never dove into your motherhood specifically, it has a ripple effect in all of those areas. Because again, if you can fix it internally, then it's going to parlay externally. And so I love coaching for that reason. We get, we do have certain curriculum that we can go through, right? So generally speaking, I have 3 programs that are then later catered to each person's needs. So I have a program that is for the bride that is having sex for the first time, or for the first time in a long time, or for the first time with this person, right? And that is such a different expectation. And it's the journey to that point of honeymoon sex and the honeymoon stage. And it helps a woman to really know what to expect, to have the kind of conversations that she needs to have with her partner before that moment comes, to
Mhm.
try to anticipate what could lead to disillusion or disappointment, frustration, or anything like that. And so we kind of work on that specifically. That's one. I also have a curriculum specific to women who are wanting to rekindle the fire in a seasoned relationship. So this is for women specifically who have gone through all the motions and all the stages. And maybe for some of them, they find themselves in an empty nester stage. And now you kind of, for whatever reason, feel like you're starting over in a lot of ways. In some ways, it's refreshing and exciting. And in some ways, it's intimidating and difficult and a new challenge. So I work with some women who want to rekindle the flame, make things different in a good and positive way. And then I have women who are on their own, who are not necessarily in a relationship, but they really want to work on their confidence in a way that it will affect their business. For some, they're entrepreneurs or business owners, or they want it to affect how they voice themselves, or what how they come into a room, and the kind of confidence they have, and how they might present themselves in a way that would optimize any of the other things they're involved with. So those are the main curriculums we go in, and then we kind of cater it specific to every woman's needs. So I love coaching.
So even though your photography business is based in Florida, people can work with you all over the world with your classes or your coaching sessions, correct?
Yes, yes.
They don't
So
have to be here. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, I love that part because we get to connect, and I get to connect with people all over. We can speak in Spanish or in English, and that's awesome too because it opens me up to some other women who prefer to expand themselves or express themselves in Spanish better, is their heart language. And so, yeah, it's really neat to be able to connect that way virtually all over the world.
So one last question, Johnny Otis, before we go. If somebody is listening and they're struggling with their confidence or their femininity, what advice would you give to them?
I would say start with outlining your identity, who you are. Because if you know who you are, then you know your worth, your intrinsic worth and value. And then the external things that happen, or what happens in the vessel of your physical body, doesn't impact you with as much force, right?
Mm.
It will still impact you, but you have built the kind of roots that grow deep into the ground to the point where you are not tossed to and fro by what happens. It could be a relational issue, or it could be a physical issue. It could be a health problem. It could be all kinds of things that can happen and affect you. But if you know who you are, you're really comfortable in your identity and in your intrinsic worth and value. For me, that's as a child of God, as a woman of faith, and who I am in Christ gives me intrinsic value, and it gives me an identity that is not shaken. And so other things can come and they'll rattle me, I won't lie, but they won't destroy me. And I think that if you are struggling with confidence as you listen to this, let's get back to getting to know you and understand what your identity is. Where is your value found? If you had nothing else, if all of your titles were stripped, if your body looked different tomorrow, if your health looked different, if your finances were different, if your relationships changed, who are you? What is your identity like? Where is your worth found? And then you can work externally from there. And that's the way that blossom grows.
That is great advice. And it sounds so simple, but I'll be really transparent. For a long time, I thought I knew who I was, but I didn't. What
Mm,
I realized was that I was whatever I thought everybody needed from me and
mm,
not really who I was. And it took a long time. And first off, to even realize that's what I was doing. And then when I realized it, it does take a lot of work to really pull layers back and say or ask yourself, like, who am I? And to identify that. So great advice. Love that advice. Johnny
it
Otis,
takes a lot
thank
of work.
you
Thank you so
so
much.
much for coming on. This was wonderful. And everybody, you can get the links on how to reach Janioris on her website and social media. All the links are right below in the notes, and take a look and check her out. Connect with her. You will not be disappointed. I promise you. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for this time. It's been a delight and a pleasure to chat with you.
Thanks. All right, guys, we'll see ya.